Hello and welcome to Rotary in Action. I'm your host, Marty Peters, and this evening we have a very special story to tell you about village banking. It seems some 20 years ago, Dr. Eunice had a great dream to share how to create wealth and give an opportunity for women in developing nations, a chance to become financially independent and to work for their own, building their own self-esteem. When we come back, I'm going to share with you some very special man and woman who have been literally all over the world making this dream become a reality. We'll be right back.
The efforts Rotarians make in advancing international understanding, goodwill, and peace revolve around international service. Rotarians express their international vision through generous financial contributions to the Rotary Foundation, which is central to Rotary International's service endeavors. Through the programs of the Rotary Foundation, Rotarians sponsor humanitarian, community development, and educational projects worldwide. The purpose of these programs is to further international understanding and encourage friendly relations. Central America is one of many regions in which the work of Rotarians changes lives.
Edmunda Cecilia's day begins at 4 a.m. Here in her newly created sewing shop in Tegucigalpa, Honduras, she spends long hours making clothes and blankets. It is the modest beginnings of a business that is giving Edmunda an opportunity to make it on her own, a chance to ensure that her 3 children will not grow up in poverty. Edmunda's story is similar to hundreds of other Central American women who, for the first time in their lives, are being given loans to grow a business. And making it all possible are dozens of volunteers from Rotary International.
The Rotary Club helped me start my business and obtain a sewing machine. And I also bought material to work with. And that's how I am working with the money that the Rotary Club lent me.
Julio Villalta is a Rotary Club member in Tegucigalpa. He helps to oversee the loan program, linking members of the service club to women in Central America, desperate for help.
The idea is to have people graduate in 3 years from these revolving loans. This works by giving a small loan of $120 to $150 to each person. Each bank has approximately 10 to 15 people, and each of them is individually responsible for their loan.
I pay, and I am the head of my family. I buy materials to use. Then, from my sales, I buy more to continue working.
Welcome back, and with me today we have 2 very special guests. Timi Gleason is a very charming lady who was a past president of a Rotary Club some years ago and is very, very active in this village banking process. And also with us is Phil Dotz. Phil Dotz has been a member of Rotary Clubs for about 17 years and has been the catalyst in motivating many people, literally motivating hundreds of us to get down and get involved in village banking. Phil, let me ask the question to you of this Mohammed Yedis. How did this doctor get this great dream? How did this all happen?
He was teaching economics at the University of Bangladesh in Chittagong in Bangladesh, and he was teaching macroeconomics, which said that if you poured millions of dollars into a country to build up the superstructure, the infrastructure, as they were doing at the time, that it would trickle down to the poor people. And it wasn't. People were dropping dead in the streets, the worst famine in the history of the area. And he couldn't understand why. By all he taught, it couldn't happen. So he went out into the villages and interviewed the women and the people in the villages, trying to find out what really was wrong, what was happening. And he found found one woman in particular who was making bamboo stools. And she made the most beautiful stools you've ever seen. Wonderful. And she worked 12 or 13 hours a day. And he asked her how much she made. She said 2 pennies. 2 pennies a day. And she explained that the reason was that she didn't have the money to buy the raw materials herself. So she had to borrow from the trader. So then the trader bought back the finished product at just barely more than the cost of the materials. So that's what gave Giannis the idea that credit was a solution to their problem. He found 27 other women in the area that had the same problem, borrowing from a money lender or the trader, making different products. And so he went to the bank and asked them if they would loan the women $27. 32 women, $27 was the story. And the bankers laughed at him. He said, well, you know, we can't loan $27 to 32 people. The paperwork alone would break us. So he decided he'd do it himself. So he loaned the money, and they paid it back, plus the interest. And he kept doing that, and he brought in all of his students to help. And soon he thought, well, I have to start my own bank. So he started the Grameen Bank, and Grameen means village in Bangladeshi. So he started the first village bank. And that bank that loaned $27 in 1974 now loans $1.5 million every day.
Timi, how did you get involved in this? Is this the same involvement?
I was involved in a leadership class that was 4 months long, just through another group. And we were responsible for setting up a project, and then they were mentoring us on how to go about creating it to be a big possibility. And they gave us some examples. One of the examples was one of our fellow Rotarians working on these village banks. And that was it. I had to be involved.
Yeah. Where did you go the very first trip you ever took?
Down to Chiapas, which is near Guatemala. It's in Mexico. Very colorful area, picturesque. It was an incredible experience. In fact, you know, I hope we'll talk about this because the involvement of the children, the language issues, some of the cultural issues, it's really incredible.
And all of these things have happened all over the world, from Bangladesh now to Central and Latin America. Is that right?
All over the
The
world.
Philippines.
Yes.
Phil, if you had to put it in a nutshell, how would you characterize the rate of return of families growing and becoming better? Has this been an astronomical thing, or?
It's a true miracle, the change in the people's lives. A woman who has never had anything can, an example, in Managua, Nicaragua, there was a woman on the dump in Managua, lived in a cardboard shack, had 4 children. She fed 2 one day and 2 the other because she couldn't feed them all. And she borrowed $60 to buy tools, and she started repairing the appliances she found in the dump, the small appliances, and she repaired those and sold them, and she's now called Mrs. Fix-It. And she never had to borrow another nickel, and those kids are all in school now. It's a marvelous story.
There are so many stories like this, but it's exciting to see the passion that you both have had in being involved in hands-on projects. How did it feel when you were there the first time, Timi? Did it?
It was beyond anything that I'd imagined, Marty. I knew that I would like it because I'd heard the stories of the women and how brave they are, but it was incredible. Down in Chiapas, it's run by Spanish-speaking people because it's Mexico. But the women, many of the women that are poorest of the poor, and we haven't really talked about that, but that's what we're going for, is the poorest of the poor in these banks. They don't speak Spanish. So they're overcoming language barriers. Many of them don't sign their own names. They don't know how to. They're taught how to do that. They definitely do not understand the concept of money. They're taught all of that. And then week after week, they're responsible, they pay the loans back. And I think the magic that I saw was the children. The children are there with their mothers. They're either on their backs or they're standing there right there at the tables when the mothers are counting out the money to pay back their loans each week. And the children are learning something that they wouldn't have had any exposure to.
You know, I appreciate your enthusiasm. It just sort of bubbles out at all of us, I think. But I'd like to have you sort of see a tape of a lady that was making tortillas. And I think she was in, if I'm not mistaken, in Honduras, maybe perhaps Guatemala. Let's spend some time and look at that, and we'll be right back to share how she did it and how it's changed her life.
Right.
56-year-old Juana Rodriguez is enjoying similar success selling tortillas. The income from the business helps her to support 6 grandchildren. It has been a difficult struggle for Juana. Her eldest daughter was killed in the United States while searching for a better life. The children were left with no one to turn to but Juana.
I play the role of mother and father to all these children because there is no one else to help me. We are alone.
Juana's business has become a family affair. Her grandchildren help to sell the tortillas in markets around Tegucigalpa. And the money allows her to provide essentials she otherwise could not afford.
I buy them notebooks, I buy clothes, and they also help me sell.
The program is on its 2nd year. Hundreds of women have taken advantage of the loans. All have been repaid on time and in full. And many women have successfully learned to save money, helping their businesses to expand.
So with 3 years of experience paying and helping their business grow, they can now get credit from the private banks.
Thanks for coming back. Phil, the question that I have is, I know that these loans are granted to these women, but how does that loan game or that loan process work? Is it just one-on-one, or how do they evolve these loans?
Well, for the most part, a woman wants to do a project. She wants to do a certain business. So she has to find 4 other people, 4 other women that want to do a business also, not the same business. And they can't live in the same household or eat out of the same pot, as they say. So she gathers 5 people, including herself, together, and they each borrow their money individually, but they're all 5 guaranteeing each other's loans. So that's one of the reasons, that peer pressure is one of the reasons that they have a 94 to 98% payback ratio in most village banks.
And these aren't free loans. They actually charge interest on the loans as well.
They charge interest, yes.
So that this pot gets larger over a period of time for more?
Yes, very much so. It's self-perpetuating to a certain extent.
And Timi, we talked earlier about the women being independent, but also the children. What was your impression being down there of the children and how it impacted those children who were around in the family?
I think it's very healthy. There's several levels of self-esteem being affected here. There's the children seeing the mom and the role that the mom is playing in being responsible and doing something that culturally they're not taught. So the children have a paradigm that they take into their generation. I think that it's really important. And also the mothers they get the opportunity to develop their personal skills. Many of them emerge as leaders within the groups, and they're influential in getting other women to come into the banks and to reassuring the women, and to many of them grow forward and take on new skills and can become spokespersons for the banks.
We talked earlier also about this process of how these women become leaders, and yet none of them have been leaders before.
No.
How does that rise to, how do these people step forward, I guess?
Maybe we should take a step back for a second and talk about why it's mostly women that are receiving these loans, which we haven't really addressed here. It is largely women because of the children, because the women in all of these cultures are very, very poor. They may not have any males around for support, or their males may be off working in other cities. And so these women are living in extreme poverty. So the loans do tend to go towards females and females with children. Because as the women create money and build, they also build savings, which we haven't talked about. They start to raise the standard of their family. Children can start to go to school. They raise the sanitary conditions in their homes. And when we're talking homes, we're talking, shacks with dirt floors, exposure to the elements. That's where these loans are going. And these women are showing tremendous courage. And they're affecting the children, but they're also affecting themselves. There's many stories about a woman going to bed the night before she gets her first loan, praying to God for the courage to do it right and to pay it back, and thanking God for feeling so good about her that she would be allowed to have a loan.
That's probably the first time in that individual's
Ever.
life, forever,
Ever life.
because the culture never permitted it.
Right. There's definitely some self-esteem issues here, and that's, I think, the magic of this program.
I was going to ask you, Phil, you've been there, both of you have been, but when you've gone down there, what's the experience you've had with regards to a foreigner coming in with this kind of economic aid? How does that encourage these women? Are they afraid of us? Are they fearful of this, not knowing the system, but also we're different culture and they're there?
In Ecuador, we didn't have that problem. In Chiapas, Mexico, we had to a certain extent. In Chihuahua, Mexico, they were very suspicious of us. They had some problems with credit unions that took their money and ran. And they didn't trust anybody. It was very difficult to get off the ground in Chihuahua.
Following up on that, how does it work after maybe a year or two when you go back? I'm assuming that when the system works, they are in love and they can't wait to see you. Is that similar?
Well, I've always been treated with a lot of respect. I think they're glad to see a woman coming down and being part of the group. We were asked when we were in Sonora, Chihuahua, that whether we belong to a political group or a religious group. And there were also some rumors in the neighborhood that the Americans, not necessarily us, but that Americans will come down and take your children if you get involved with them. So then once again, they're showing great courage and trust. You know, they overcome a lot of the cultural barriers that they're facing.
You know, as a member of Rotary for so many years, I take this all for granted. And I think most Rotarians do. You at home watching this, have an opportunity to really see the window of the world and the window of hope when we're talking to Timi and to Phil, because that's the dream that is giving them hope, and that culture works to change their dreams and to permit them to say, yes, we can. That's the hope we give. What I'd like to do is to share with you a very special introduction on Ambassadorial Scholars, which is another program that Rotary does, but I'd like to have you take a look at this and we'll be right back. Phil, it's an amazing story that we've shared tonight with both of you and Timi, but this thing on getting money together, I'm sort of curious, how does that process work inside Rotary to create these kinds of funds that are necessary to be going to these third world countries? Tell us a little bit how that process works.
A club or a person has to decide they want to do a village bank. And so I'll use myself for an example. When my wife died, I decided to do a village bank in her memory. And so I went to Marshall Saunders, who was the district village bank chairman at the time. And he put me in touch with the district governor in Ecuador. And so we corresponded, and I went down and talked to him and met the Rotarians, and that's not all necessary, but that's what I did. And then I came back and talked to my club and told them what I wanted to do, and talked to other clubs and told them what I wanted to do. And through their generosity, instead of doing one club, we wound up doing 20 clubs in Ecuador. And it's just snowballed. because it's such a wonderful project. Now, all you have to do is tell people what it is, and the funding comes.
So that the matching grant, some money is raised, say in North America in a Rotary Club, and a little club down in another third world country will put in maybe $200 or whatever.
Well, we actually are pretty fortunate in Ecuador. They'll put up $1,500 for a $20,000 grant, which is a lot of money to them.
Very much.
In Chiapas, it was $500.
Yeah.
So there's a difference in the economic situation.
But the difference between $1,000 or $1,500, some of those countries, $200 is a pot of money that they never see in their lifetimes.
The real wonder of Rotary financing is we have $2,000. We get $1,000 from the, we'll say in Ecuador, so we have $3,000. Our district will match our $2,000, so now we have $5,000. We take that to the district, to the foundation, and they double that, and we have $10,000.
And that's Rotary International.
Yes, you've grown from that $2,000 to $10,000.
It's amazing.
You can't grow your money anywhere else like that.
Well, it's a very good internal rate of return. Timi, when you talked about children earlier, I'm reminded of the story that I heard that these men and women, or these families that get these funds, a lot of things happen to change the future destiny of these children. Tell us a little bit about how that works and how these kids get involved in better schooling and family business.
Well, depending on which country you're in, because in India they have very specific rules that as you progress through the program, you must improve your sanitary conditions. You must get a home that has a roof over it. You must, send the children to school. But you see it everywhere, that as the women pay the loans back and they build their savings, which they're really encouraged to do besides paying interest, that there is extra money. So they reinvest if it's a cow that they've bought so that they can have milk. They reinvest. If it's making tamales, they may get a better stove or a better pot. If it's making materials, dresses or whatever, they just upgrade until it becomes a big business. We saw a woman in Sonora who had figured out that she could buy the parts to bicycles, because they don't have cars, but they do ride bicycles on the dirt roads. She could make enough money in a month to pay her whole loan off. That's how lucrative that business was, and she just sort of fell into it. So we saw her little shop with the wheels and the tires hanging and that kind of thing.
I guess refer it to capitalism being alive today and doing very, very well in developing nations.
Yeah. And some of the women are more enterprising than others, and some of the women are incredibly powerful, and that comes out in these programs because it's their program, and their leadership skills rise to the top.
And they eventually, Phil, am I correct, that they take over and help administer these banks in the future and get more women in because of the success that they've had themselves?
They actually have their own board of directors. They have their own president of the bank, and they manage. It's like a credit union is here. It's done by the people.
And this is less than 20 years old, and now they're lending roughly $1 million a day?
$1.5 million a day. That's the Grameen Bank alone in Bangladesh.
And where do you envision this going in the next 10 or 15 years? It seems as though this is just something that will never end. Well, thank God.
Yeah, I was interested in it because I see it as a prototype for some of the changes we can make in this country. We're encumbered a little bit on this end by tax laws and that kind of thing, but I think there's some excellent examples of enterprise, small enterprise, that we can copy and learn from.
If anything, I'm so excited because I've seen some of these videos that we are sharing with you this evening. And this next one is sort of a summary of village banking, and I'd like to have us take a look at that and share this experience with you.
Rotary International's commitment to the revolving loan program extends beyond Honduras. Women in Guatemala, El Salvador, Costa Rica, Panama, and Belize are also being given the opportunity to break the cycle of poverty. More than $250,000 has gone to these budding entrepreneurs so far, and another $250,000 has been committed by the Rotary Foundation.
I think Rotary has an important philosophy. I like it a lot because before I could help someone on the street with $1, but now I can help with $100,000 projects that have a larger impact in their lives.
And it's not difficult to see that the loans have done more than help start new businesses. They've changed the lives of entire families.
I thank them for the money they lent us, and God will pay them back.
I wanted to thank you both, Phil and Timi, for being here this evening, and I know that your passion is actually contagious. I hope that by watching this evening or this afternoon, you've had a chance to say, hey, if I want to get involved, I can. The best way is to simply pick up a phone, call your local Rotary Club, and say, I'd like to get involved in village banking. If you do it, you'll never be sad. You'll be excited, as I know Phil and Timi are. It's a very special gift, and it literally can change the world. I thank you for watching us, and we'll see you next time for Rotary in Action.
Many places around the world are still fighting a war that most Americans don't know about, the war against polio. The paralyzing disease that held America hostage earlier this century continues to cripple thousands of children each year. Since 1985, Rotary International's 1.2 million members have joined the battle against polio. Rotary volunteers have fought this disease in their communities, educating parents about polio and helping health officials in vaccinating children everywhere. Along with Rotary's partners, the World Health Organization, UNICEF, and the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, over 1 billion children have been immunized against polio. The end of the war against polio is near. Once victory is achieved, this historic health drive will guide in the fight against other vaccine-preventable diseases, giving the children of the world a healthier future. To find out more about Rotary's Polio Plus program, visit www.rotary.org. Rotary, winning the war against polio.